Imagine winning the right to host the biggest football tournament on Earth. The stadiums are packed, millions of fans are arriving from around the world, and billions of people are watching. On paper, it sounds like a dream, but what happens when the final whistle is blown and the celebrations are over? What if the biggest question isn't who won the World Cup, but instead was hosting it actually worth it? The 2026 FIFA World Cup is unlike any tournament that came before it. Canada, Mexico, and the United States are sharing the event across 16 host cities. 48 teams will compete, and a record 104 matches will be played over 34 days. That means an enormous global celebration, but it also means an enormous logistical and financial challenge. And the interesting part is that Canada, Mexico, and the United States aren't facing exactly the same situation. For some cities, the World Cup could bring huge numbers of tourists, new investment, international attention, and a major boost for football. For others, the costs of preparing for the tournament could become a burden that lasts long after the fans have gone home. So how did the biggest World Cup ever turn into such a complicated gamble for its hosts? And could the tournament eventually leave some cities wondering whether they paid too much for the privilege? The 2026 World Cup represents one of the biggest changes in modern football. For decades, the tournament featured 32 teams. Now there are 48. FIFA expanded format creates 12 groups of 4 teams followed by a round of 32, and the tournament will feature 104 matches. That's 40 more games than the 2022 World Cup. Then there's the geography. Previous tournaments were largely concentrated within one country, but this time the action is spread across Canada, Mexico, and the United States. Canada has Toronto and Vancouver. Mexico has Guadalajara, Mexico City, and Monterrey. And the United States has 11 host cities spread across the country. At first glance, the setup makes a lot of sense. The United States already has massive stadiums, major international airports, huge hotel networks, highways, and an established sports infrastructure. Mexico brings one of the deepest football cultures in the world, along with the legendary Estadio Azteca. Canada, meanwhile, gets a chance to put its rapidly growing football scene in front of a global audience. But hosting a World Cup isn't just about having a stadium ready for a match. The stadium is only one piece of the puzzle. Cities also have to deal with transportation, security, accommodation, public services, temporary infrastructure, crowd management, and countless other demands that most fans will never see. And underneath all of it is one simple question: who is paying for everything? There is no doubt that a World Cup can generate enormous economic activity. Fans fly in, hotels fill up, restaurants get busier, local businesses receive international exposure, and cities can use the tournament as an opportunity to speed up projects that might otherwise take years. But there's an important difference between creating economic activity and actually making money. A city can welcome hundreds of thousands of visitors and still end up facing major public expenses. Canada is a good example. The country is hosting 13 matches, with 6 taking place in Toronto and 7 in Vancouver. That sounds like an incredible opportunity, and it is, but the bigger question is what remains once those matches are over. A World Cup lasts only a few weeks. Infrastructure, however, can remain for decades. That creates a difficult calculation for governments and taxpayers. If a city spends heavily to prepare for an event that lasts just over a month, the long-term benefits have to be large enough to justify those costs. And then there's another challenge that makes the 2026 tournament especially unusual: distance. This isn't a World Cup where fans can stay in one part of the country and easily travel between most of the venues. The tournament stretches across an enormous part of North America. Teams, supporters, staff, and officials will be moving between cities separated by thousands of kilometers. For fans, that could make the tournament an incredible adventure. For organizers and host cities, it creates a completely different logistical challenge. Every airport, road, hotel, security operation, and transportation system has to handle the extra pressure. Now picture the tournament itself. The opening match takes place in Mexico City. Fans from all over the world arrive, the streets fill with football shirts, and suddenly the entire city is part of the biggest sporting event on the planet. Then the tournament moves north: Toronto, Vancouver, Los Angeles, Miami, Dallas, Seattle, New York, and New Jersey. 16 host cities become part of one enormous football machine. For supporters, it could be spectacular. For local businesses, it could be a once-in-a-generation opportunity. But behind all those celebrations, cities still have to function normally. Residents still need to get to work. Emergency services still have to respond to calls. Airports have to move huge numbers of passengers. Hotels need enough rooms. Roads need to handle the extra traffic. And stadiums have to meet FIFA demanding requirements. That's what makes the 2026 World Cup such an interesting experiment. This isn't just a football tournament. It's a test of whether three enormous countries can work together to stage one of the largest sporting events in history. And the experience won't be the same everywhere. The United States is carrying the largest share of the tournament, with 11 host cities, while Canada and Mexico are hosting matches across fewer locations. That means each country, and even each individual city, could walk away with a very different experience. One city might see the World Cup as an extraordinary tourism boom. Another might remember it for traffic, security costs, public spending, and the pressure placed on local infrastructure. And here's where things get really interesting. A World Cup doesn't have to be an obvious failure for a host city to regret it. It only has to deliver less than people expected. That's an important distinction. The tournament can be a huge success on television. Fans can love it, players can create unforgettable moments, businesses can make money, the world can watch and celebrate. And yet a particular city could still conclude that its own costs were simply too high. That's the risk that comes with hosting a mega event. The headline numbers always sound incredible. Millions of visitors, billions of dollars in economic activity, global exposure, and thousands of jobs. But those numbers don't automatically tell us how much value actually stays with ordinary residents or local governments. That's why the true legacy of the 2026 World Cup won't be decided when the final is played. It will take years to understand what the tournament really left behind. Did the infrastructure remain useful? Did tourism continue after the fans went home? Did local businesses benefit in the long run? Did football become more popular? Did the tournament create new opportunities for young players? And perhaps most importantly, did residents believe the price was worth paying? There is also a huge potential upside that shouldn't be ignored. Canada, Mexico, and the United States could gain something from this tournament that is much harder to measure in dollars. They could change the football culture of an entire region. Canada enters the tournament with a football scene that has grown dramatically in recent years. Mexico already has one of the world's strongest football traditions, and the United States has spent decades building its professional soccer system and expanding the sport's popularity. A successful World Cup could accelerate all of that. More children could start playing football. More stadiums could become regular football venues. More investors could enter the sport. More international fans could become interested in North American clubs and leagues. And more young players could look at football as a serious future. Those benefits won't necessarily appear on a government spreadsheet, but they could become one of the tournament's most important legacies. Because a World Cup isn't only about what happens during the few weeks when the matches are being played. It's also about what remains after the crowds disappear. So will Canada, Mexico, and the United States eventually regret hosting the 2026 World Cup? The answer isn't simple, and it may take years before we know for sure. What we do know is that this tournament has already changed the scale of the World Cup. 48 teams, 3 host nations, 16 host cities, 104 matches, and a final in New York and New Jersey on July 19, 2026. But football history won't remember only the goals, the trophies, and the dramatic moments. It will also remember what happened to the cities that opened their doors to the world. Because hosting a World Cup is easy to celebrate while the stadium lights are shining, the fans are singing, and the cameras are rolling. The real test comes later, when those lights finally go out and the visitors leave. Years from now, the most interesting question may not be who lifted the trophy. It may be whether the countries that welcomed the world ultimately decided that the price of hosting the biggest World Cup in history was worth paying.